Good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning here in the UK. Okay, so I have woken up with Wayfarer's motion for summary judgment on the docket. There's nothing from Blake Lively, which is surprised me. I'm not sure if it's what time it is over there. I was also expecting not just her motion for summary judgment, but also her opposition to Wayfarer's motion for judgment on the pleadings. And I haven't seen anything from Blake Lively. With Wayfarer's filings, they're huge. There's a lot. So I am going to have to do coverage in several parts. So, like, I don't even know how many there's going to be, but there's multiple, documents on the docket, at least two actually, which are in excess of 60 pages. So there's a lot of attachments. I mean, a lot of attachments. The vast majority of them are still sealed. So I'm looking forward to seeing them unsealed. But wow, that's going to be a lot of work. I'm going to start with this letter. This is a letter filed just regarding the sealing of the attachment. And I just love this. On behalf of Wayfarer parties, we write pursuant to the court's individual rules to respectfully request that the court preliminarily seal portions of the Wayfarer parties' motion for summary judgment and associated exhibits. The papers refer to discovery material designated confidential. To be clear, the Wayfarer parties do not believe that much of this material should be sealed, especially to the extent it includes Blake Lively's contemporaneous communications with others about her work on the film, which are central to the dispute at hand. So we have it. They are part of the attachments. Blake Lively is what she was saying to people in the moment, in real time, about the work she was doing on the film, which would be not only would potentially, evidence whether she was trying to take over the film, but also whether there was any sexual harassment that she was communicating, whether she was openly communicating that she was uncomfortable, that she was being smeared against. So they then go on to say, nevertheless, in accordance with Rule 4B of the attachment A, Wayfarer parties request that the court not rule on this letter motion to seal for 1 week so that the parties can meet and confer, and so that any party may file motions for continued sealing if they so choose. Wayfarer parties have also redacted personal identifying information, including phone numbers, email addresses, and certain financial information from these materials, and ask that any such PII be permanently sealed. So it's exciting, so exciting. This is all the attachments. Like, it's wild, but this makes the attachments a bit more clearer. Then there was something in here that really caught my eye that I have been itching to see. It's still sealed at the moment, but we'll get there. Where is it? Yeah, there's a lot. Oh, everyone see what is here. Oh, we've all been waiting for it. It is the Van Zandt subpoena to Stephanie Jones. Is it to Stephanie Jones or is it to Jones Works? Because if it's to Stephanie Jones, then it's a bit odd. Oh no, I suppose not. It's just I would have thought if they were looking for data from an employee, then the subpoena would have rightfully gone to Jones Works, not Stephanie Jones as an individual. But we will see. We will see. Right, where to even start with? So I'm going to start with the main motion, I think. So the memorandum of law in support of Wayfarer Party's motion for summary judgment. This is page 1 of 73. So, like I say, I'm going to have to find my feet as I go along, but I will have to do the actual memorandum as one document. There's a Rule 56.1 statement, which I did, I did 2 separate readings with Jen Abels, did the main memorandum, and then did her Rule 56.1 statements separately in another video. I think I did it separately. I will be doing that here because that statement, Jen Abels was quite short. Her memorandum was 22 pages, so there's a world of difference. I think this is obviously 73 pages. A lot of that is not going to be. It's going to be stuff like this. The index, table of contents, the table of case citations. So I think there was an agreement that the main body of the text of these things was going to be 60 pages. The statement is as long, and then there's a pile of decorations. There are some exhibits that are unsealed, so I will probably do this video for the memorandum, another one for the Rule 56.1 statement, and then another one for any declarations and unredacted, unsealed exhibits. And that will probably be my starting point, I think. Because I don't want the, I know some people don't mind, but if I read all of these in one go, I think Lauren's live was close to 3 hours. I don't want to do that in one sitting for a recorded video. But I will, I think if I can keep each section down to under an hour, I will be really, doing some kind of magic there. But these are big documents, so if people are interested, I'm not going to get this into a 10 or 20 minute video. What I will do is I'll go through this and I will probably highlight something, and then I will do a much shorter clipped video if possible, just on the points that I highlight. And I think that's the best way to cover all of this. Right, I hope everyone is comfortable. If there's any background noise, I'm not going to apologise, and I am not going to start again, which is what I would normally do. So I text everyone in my house and told them to be quiet. They're generally good, but it is what it is. Right. Okay. Introduction. Blake Lively, an immensely powerful A-list actor, agreed to act in a film adaptation of It Ends With Us, a book with themes of sex and domestic violence. During the initial stages of filming, she voiced objections to certain on-the-set behavior she did not like. That behavior, involving no more than miscommunications and awkward comments, falls well below the threshold for any claim of sexual harassment or other legal wrong, especially in the context of collaborating to make a sensual and provocative sexually charged film. Regardless, Lively's concerns were heard and fully accommodated. It is disputed that whatever she claimed to have experienced ceased. Sorry, it is undisputed that whatever she claimed to have experienced ceased. Filming continued during all future stages entirely without incident in an environment Lively touted as redacted and redacted, including the filming of all intimate scenes involving Lively herself. Even Lively's then lawyer said no formal HR process, let alone litigation, was necessary. Any issues had been successfully resolved. Months then went by, but as the film was edited and moved towards its premiere, something else happened. Lively asserted control of the film and took aggressive steps to minimize Justin Baldoni's role. Even though Baldoni had conceived, directed, and co-starred in the film, and it had been produced and co-financed by his production company Wayfarer Studios, Lively took all the credit. She wrote to the Producers Guild of America, redacted. Oh, I can't wait to see that. At the same time, Lively and her actor husband, Ryan Reynolds, disparaged Baldoni to their famous, high-powered friends in Hollywood and to Baldoni's talent agency. As the film's premiere approached, Lively became increasingly hostile. She excluded Baldoni from marketing materials, press, and promotions for the film, snubbed him on social media, urged Sony to eliminate his A Film By credit, and even tried to exclude him from the premiere. In light of these astounding developments, and not the minor concerns about the on-set behaviour raised and successfully resolved many months earlier, Baldoni sought the advice of a crisis management public relations firm, as any responsible person in his position would do. Oh, yeah. He wanted to minimize fallout from media coverage of Lively's increasing attempts to alienate him from the film. He did so for the benefit of both his professional reputation and the newly released film. He relied on media professionals to boost his image and assure that any coverage would be balanced and accurate. None of that is against the law, and that's a really important point. Just to kind of remind everyone, if Lively was solely complaining about a smear campaign, there is nothing illegal about that. What makes it possible for her to bring a claim is that she is citing this smear campaign as retaliation for her speaking up about sexual harassment in the workplace. So no sexual harassment equals no retaliation. Smear campaign, even if he was smearing her full throttle, which I do not believe is the case, there is nothing actionable about that. And that is incredibly important. Aided by two of the world's largest litigation firms, Lively now seeks to create causes of action where none exist. She cannot show the behaviour she disliked was caused by her sex or gender, a basic prerequisite for her sexual harassment claims. She alleges Baldoni's resort to public relations professionals was retaliation for complaints she had raised. This ignores the large temporal gap, not to mention the many intervening events between her raising of concerns and Baldoni's resort to crisis management professionals. There can be no claim for retaliation based on purported complaints raised in the distant past. I mean, it was over a year before. To put in context, I think, when we talk about actual sexual harassment, not the fact that she did a 17-point list in exchange for coming back to work, not the 30-point list she claimed she presented at a, meeting in her penthouse. The actual sexual harassment, which would have been during the production, the first stage, which covers the period of around you know, I think it could potentially cover April, definitely May, and maybe the start of early June. Not things didn't necessarily happen in all of those months, but that is the window we're looking at, the actual sexual harassment. So, all she did was call a meeting later on and do a 17-point demand. Now she's going to say, now that happened in November, so what she's doing is capitalising on the fact that there was a months-long strike. Had it not been for that strike, that would have taken place much closer to the time if there were genuine concerns, but there were not. And the 17-point list was really, for me, a setup for her to obtain the PGA credit. But anyway. Nor did Baldoni and his co-defendants engage in a defamatory smear campaign. It was not illegal for Baldoni to promote positive content about himself or truthful narratives about various events. That Lively's reputation may have suffered as a result of her own ill-advised public statements and actions. This is a dispute about Hollywood reputations, not genuine legal wrongs. It does not belong in court. And that, I fully agree. I do. I fully agree with that. Mark that. That's an absolutely incredible way to end your kind of opening introduction. Statement of facts. Justin Baldoni is an actor, director, producer, and author with significant experience in addressing gender issues, including in 2 published books and a podcast devoted to questions about masculinity, all aimed at a predominantly male audience. In 2019, he obtained the rights to produce a film based on Colleen Hoover's bestseller novel, It Ends With Us. Baldoni's production company, Wayfarer Studios, which specializes in films designed to promote social change, initiated work on the film alongside Sony, with Baldoni set to serve as the film's director and lead male actor. Because the story focused on issues of domestic violence, Baldoni and Wayfarer partnered with No More, an organization dedicated to ending domestic and sexual violence, and agreed to contribute a portion of the film's proceeds to support survivors of abuse. In early planning, the parties agreed the film's publicity needed to center upon and carefully handle these serious themes. Okay, so the first pushback. Lively chose to take a lead role in a sexually charged film with adult themes. In December 2022, years into the film's development, Blake Lively, a well-known prominent actor, was cast as the female lead. She understood, nevertheless, based on the script and before she accepted the role, that the film would include sexual content and address domestic violence. Prior to filming, Lively reviewed notes from a female Sony executive stating that the audience was expecting something redacted with redacted. Lively worked as an independent contractor, but no contract was ever formed. The parties never executed any contract concerning Lively's role. Negotiations began in December 2022 between It Ends With Us movie, an entity Wayfarer Studios formed to produce the film, and Blakely Inc., a loan-out company lending Lively to perform in the film. An offer letter dated March 17, 2023, set forth the basic financial terms, which promised Lively a $1.75 million fee, plus various bonuses, but did not contain any terms regarding sexual harassment. The parties also worked towards a separate long-form agreement to include other material terms. It ends with this movie's obligations under the offer letter were expressly subject to a condition precedent, namely full execution of an agreement in a form reasonably acceptable to all parties. It ends with this movie's counsel circulated a draft of the anticipated long-form agreement between It Ends With This Movie and Blakely Inc., the actor loan-out agreement, in May 2023. The draft stated conditions precedent, including full execution of the agreement and receipt of an executed document known as an inducement. It also had a merger clause specifying that it constituted the entire agreement between the parties. A provision prohibiting special or consequential damages and other standard terms, including one stating there would be no actionable breach for any conduct unless notice was provided and cure not effected within 30 days. The same or similar terms endured throughout the drafting process. As work proceeded on the film, payments were made pursuant to the offer letter. The parties continued to negotiate the terms of the long-form ALA into July 2024. But Lively herself continued withholding her signature to avoid being bound. No ALA was ever signed. From the outset, Lively saw increased control over the film. Although recruited to act in the film, Lively immediately assumed an active role in production and in developing the film script, even before filming began. Among other things, she provided Baldoni with a rewrite of the rooftop scene in which Baldoni's character and Lively's character first meet. She explained that her version of the scene, redacted. It retained a line from the book in redacted. Okay. In messages to Baldoni, Lively referred to her revised draft as featuring redacted. Lively took special steps to convince Baldoni to accept her version of this scene, redacted. So we can obviously guess that's the Taylor Swift, Ryan Reynolds kind of alleged inducement to Baldoni to accept her version. After the meeting, Baldoni told Lively he would have gladly accepted her revisions even without urging from redacted. Lively has since disclosed that Reynolds, not she, rewrote the scene. This episode, which occurred even before filming began, was the first of a series of events in which Lively relied on an array of Hollywood friends to increase her control over the film, while denigrating Baldoni to them along the way. An array of Hollywood friends. That should be interesting. Before filming began, Lively took additional steps to influence the direction of and take control of the film. At her request, Wayfarer abandoned plans to film the movie in Boston, where the novel takes place, and relocated the set to New Jersey, near Lively's home. Wayfarer also agreed to change the start date and schedule to accommodate Lively's other professional and personal commitments. Wow, so many red flags already. It's frustrating that Wayfarer just didn't say, do you know what, your star power is not going to be worth this. You're already being difficult. And I hope, if nothing else, they do take a lesson from that. If anything good is to come out of this, it's that, you know, they will be more cautious. Hopefully not too much cautious, because Lively is, she does not act for all women. She is very much in the minority. Okay, Lively raised concerns about her physical appearance. Having recently given birth, Lively expressed concerns to Baldoni's and others that she redacted. When Lively asked Baldoni, redacted, Baldoni responded kindly, redacted. Meanwhile, Lively raised the same concerns to her agent, noting, redacted. Lively's communications reflect her frank awareness that the film was intended to achieve a certain sexualized imagery. She told her agent, redacted. Lively was equally frank with Baldoni, redacted. She added, redacted. There are going to be redactions. Sorry. I'll do my best with what we got. Basically, what I'm assuming happened there is she expressed her concerns about her body image following giving birth to both Baldoni and her agent quite openly. And there we have some text message quotes or something as to the conversations that were going on at the time around that. And that is actually important because obviously when we're talking about, allegations of fat shaming, the context being that she was clearly insecure, that's not blaming her. But then when you look at, was she really fat shamed or was she just insecure? So, and then misjudged the whole, need to know her weight for a lift, and basically prioritized her needs and concerns over Baldoni's needs regarding like his back injury. Wayfarer. It ends with us movie and Baldoni took steps to create a safe set. Wayfarer had a set of industry standard policies and procedures in place to prevent harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. Its employee handbook expressly prohibits such conduct and encourages employees to report violations. To enforce these procedures, Wayfarer had a HR department with dedicated staff. Prior to filming, It Ends With Us movie held an anti-discrimination training administered by an outside law firm. It Ends With Us movie also included a worker safety hotline on its daily call sheets. I mean, to be fair, these guys are going above and beyond. They're putting everything and probably more in terms of safeguarding. Lively benefited from other protections as well. The offer letter provided that she would not perform any nudity or simulated sex without her prior written consent and without negotiation and execution of a formal nudity rider. In April 2023, before filming began, It Ends With Us movie hired Elizabeth Talbot to serve as the intimacy coordinator for the film. Lively was given the opportunity to meet with Talbot a month before filming began, but declined. Before shooting began, Talbot considered the content of anticipated intimate scenes and suggested details and clarifications. She also spoke with Lively about Lively's boundaries. When Lively expressed reservations about intimate scenes, Baldoni volunteered to keep the focus on his own body so that scenes could be redacted. Prior to shooting, Baldoni and Lively were both provided with nudity riders detailing their consent and boundaries concerning intimate scenes. In the first phase of filming, Lively did not film any intimate scenes but voiced objections to certain behaviour. Okay, so here we're going to get into it. Filming began on the set of New Jersey on May 15, 2023. It stopped on June 14, 2023 due to strikes by the Writers Guild of America and SAG-AFTRA. None of Lively's intimate scenes were rehearsed or filmed during this period. However, all the incidents Lively now characterizes as compromising a hostile work environment occurred prior to or during this first phase of filming. Lively stated concerns, even if accepted as true, all involve incidents of relatively low level or innocuous behavior that, considered separately or together, fall far short of actionable discrimination or sexual harassment. For instance, Lively claims Baldoni described his genitalia in their first meeting before she had agreed to join the film. This is a hyperbolic lawyer's spin on what really happened. So they obviously say what happened, but it's all redacted. Such a statement is obviously not justification to bring any claim in court. Indeed, Lively herself seemed unfazed. She had raised the subject. She raised the subject. Well, there's a surprise. Did not complain to anyone at the time, and after the meeting, her husband sent Baldoni an effusive message saying, redacted. I'm pretty sure what he said was, I fucking love you, Justin. It's something like that. And talks about his perineum. Lively also accuses Baldoni of fat shaming. This allegation is based on a single instance in which Baldoni, who had chronic back problems and anticipated a scene in which he would have to lift Lively up, privately asked a physical trainer he had consulted with, who also trained Lively, about her weight. He did so discreetly, outside the workplace and outside Lively's hearing. But even if this inquiry was, as Lively now portrays it, a sly criticism, any petty slight that might have arisen when the trainer, on his own initiative, repeated the comment to Lively is simply too trivial to constitute sexual harassment. Lively further accuses Baldoni of adding gratuitous sexual content to the script before filming began. The evidence shows, however, that the scenes were redacted to align with the explicit female-authored book on which the film was based. Baldoni asked a female intimacy coordinator to review them with Lively. To the extent Lively objected, scenes were revised or removed. Moreover, Lively herself rewrote other scenes to boost their sexual vibe. Lively claims Baldoni improperly used the word sexy to refer to her wardrobe, her characters actually, on one occasion, and to that of another actor on another occasion, and that at one point he complimented Lively's own personal low-cut outfit. Such passing sporadic comments, while perhaps ill-advised, are not outrageously offensive in an environment where professionals are working closely together to make a deliberately sexually charged film. Lively also asserts that Baldoni at times alluded to his own sexual and marital experiences. Again, such exchanges are hardly surprising given that Lively and Baldoni were collaborating and communicating daily about how best to portray various adult and marital themes. Lively also claims Jamie Heath, Wayfarer's CEO and one of the film's producers, momentarily glanced at her naked upper body after she permitted him to come into her trailer while she was having body makeup removed. Lively says she instructed Heath not to look at her, but at some point during their brief conversation, redacted. Whatever fleeting mishap may or may not have occurred, it is being characterized as sinister only in retrospect. At the time, Lively said, I know you weren't trying to cop a look. Lively also objected to being shown a video image relating to Heath's wife's home birth, incorrectly believing it to be pornography. Redacted. The film includes an important scene between Lively and Baldoni's characters surrounding the birth of their child, and Baldoni and Lively had discussed the scene before Heath shared the video image. Lively includes an assortment of other objections in her complaint, including that she contracted COVID on set, that after Lively told Baldoni she had never seen pornography, he shared that fact with others, that at one point Baldoni shared a personal story about being pushed past his own consent boundaries, an experience he has discussed publicly, including in his published books, and that there was too much hugging on set. Lively's objections were addressed before and during the filming hiatus. Although Lively's description of events is disputed, what is undisputed is that Lively's objections were resolved as soon as they were raised. Lively chose not to file any formal complaint, instead redacted. Consistent with that approach, after Lively and her husband chastised Baldoni for inquiring about her weight, the issue did not reoccur. Lively objected to certain sex scenes, and Baldoni revised or eliminated them accordingly. On June 1st, 2023, a few weeks into shooting, Lively met with Baldoni and Heath and reviewed various matters she was unhappy about. Baldoni and Heath apologised for Lively's discomfort. Evidently, that was enough to resolve the issue. Lively has not identified any incident after that meeting that she claims constitutes sexual harassment. On November 9th, 2023, 5 months after filming had stopped due to the strikes, Lively, through her entertainment lawyer, sent a list of protections she wanted observed in connection with any future filming. So she had the meeting with Baldoni and Heath about her discomfort on the 1st of June, but filming continued till the 14th. Lively's lawyer had said a signed agreement to abide by the protections would suffice in lieu of a more formal HR process. Lively did not commence any litigation or file any formal complaint, though her lawyer noted she reserved all legal rights. She requested these protections largely replicated protections that were already the requested protections largely replicated protections that were already in place, such as the use of nudity riders and an intimacy coordinator. Other protections implicated conduct Lively herself had engaged in the earlier phase of filming, such as improvising kissing in scenes, commenting on her own physical appearance and that of others, and hugging other cast members. Yes, this is awesome. I was wondering, because obviously we, as sleuthing, doing all the sleuthing, a bunch of us found video footage of her biting Justin Baldoni, like her, she even admits in her first amended complaint that she improvised kissing scenes, but said that did not excuse the fact that Baldoni had improvised kissing scenes. It was just complete horseshit, to be honest. It was literally a case of, really, well, if he's that bad, then how are you any better? And in many cases, she was worse. But I am so glad they formally put it into a motion that she did all these things herself. On January 4th, Lively held a production meeting at her apartment at Redacted. Lively read a list of grievances from her phone that included, in addition to incidents discussed above, a demand that Baldoni not speak to her dead father, mention his own religious beliefs, or have private multi-hours meetings in Lively's trailer with Mr. Baldoni crying. Lively also demanded notice of COVID exposures on set. On or about January 19th, 2024, Heath, acting on behalf of It Ends With Us movie, signed the protections, that's a 17-point document, as incorporated into a rider to the unsigned ALA between It Ends With Us movie and Blakely Inc. Lively refers to this document as the contract rider agreement. The contract rider agreement does not include any admission of improper conduct. It is a forward-looking document concerning behaviour once filming resumes. And that is incredibly important, because a lot of Lively supporters have incorrectly said this proves everything. He's admitted he's done this. No, that's not what the document says. The document says that this will not happen, and it is speaking in future tense. The second phase of filming proceeded without incident. Filming resumed on January 5th, 2024, and concluded February 9th. Lively raised no further objections and told another female cast member the set was professional. Whatever issues had been raised months before had been fully resolved. Okay. Lively used her famous friends and connections to take control of the film, and I can see a lot of this is going to be redacted at this point. Let's go. Shortly after filming wrapped, Lively told Sony she would not agree to promote the film unless she was permitted to participate in the edit. And just so everyone can see, that email is there, attachment 131. It's currently it's under seal, but it's there. Thereafter, she amassed an enormous level of control over the film. When Lively received pushback, she recruited famous friends, I bet Bradley Cooper's in this, to support her, while disparaging Baldoni to them. Redacted. Lots of redactions. Lively also insisted on changes to the film's credit. Redacted, and removing Baldoni's A Film by credit altogether. In a June 25th, 2024 letter to the Producers Guild of America, redacted, it is a remarkable document. That's the only bit that's not redacted. Then redacted. The redactions are so good, actually. I'm not even annoyed that it's not telling me much. I just like the way they've left the kind of snarky bits unredacted. Lively stirred up negative press about Baldoni in the film. Apparently not content to have wrested directorial and editorial control from Baldoni, Lively set out to destroy his reputation and alienate him from his own film. Lively and her famous husband unfollowed Baldoni on social media, encouraging the press and fans to suspect a feud. Redacted, loads of redactions. Unsurprisingly, the press took notice, redacted, but Lively wanted more, redacted. I can't wait for this to be unredacted. Ultimately, Baldoni was allowed to attend so long as he left the red carpet before Lively arrived, waited in the basement while she and her famous friends were photographed, and then watched the film in a separate theatre. Baldoni and Wayfarer then hired a crisis management team. It was in this context, in late July 2024, over a year after Lively's concerns about the on-set behaviour had been resolved, and faced with a new set of concerns relating to media coverage surrounding and following the film's premiere, that Baldoni and Wayfarer first entertained the concept of hiring a crisis PR team. I mean, even what I've read here, with all the redactions, so I don't actually know shit, I would be like, yeah, this guy needs to hire a crisis PR team. Even as the negative press intensified, Baldoni's team, led by Heath and his longtime publicist Jen Abel of Jones Works, agreed that it would be a mistake to fan the flames, and that redacted. On July 25th, Baldoni and Heath met with the agency group Melissa Nathan's PR firm to discuss retaining the firm for crisis management. In subsequent messages, Wayfarer reiterated that it did not want to take any offensive steps and that Nathan would not be redacted. On August 2nd, 2024, TAG circulated the scenario planning document that has been the subject of much of Lively's ire. As the title suggests, that document simply laid out a menu of possible options. It was not an agreed upon plan of action. Immediately after the premiere, numerous outlets published stories about the feud between Lively and Baldoni. This was in part prompted redacted. Baldoni's PR team, led by Abel, Nathan, and Tag, distributed positive information and stories about Baldoni and worked to mitigate or minimize negative ones. Standard operating procedure for PR professionals. Baldoni himself made numerous positive public statements about Lively. And he did. He didn't actually disparage her once. On August 7th, Abel told Nathan she was still waiting on a green light from Heath to put the social combat plan into motion. On August 9th, Wayfarer engaged Street Relations, Jed Wallace's firm, to monitor social media concerning Lively, Baldoni, and the film. Contrary to Lively's claims, Wallace testified redacted. At the same time, redacted, hoping to avoid any adverse publicity that could interfere with the reception of the newly released film. Lively suffered backlash. The attention commanded by Lively's star power and by news of the purported feud was a double-edged sword. By virtue of all the coverage, she was put under a very public microscope. In August 2024, she experienced a massive outpouring of negative sentiment, but the undisputed evidence shows Lively's own missteps were a significant driver of that response. Several press outlets picked up, for example, on Lively's decision to cross-promote a serious film about domestic violence with, among other things, her husband's summer superhero blockbuster, as well as her own hair care and beverage products. Lively, privately, redacted. Lively also come under fire for past missteps, included redacted. Lively does not dispute that any of these events actually occurred. She merely insinuates that defendants had a role in bringing them to light. The evidence does not support her headline claims. After months of scorched earth discovery, backed up by a pounding drumbeat of almost daily motions to compel, Lively has been unable to identify any instance in which any defendant distributed or promoted any false story about her, even after subpoenaing dozens of content creators. Yes, I can personally, as one of those, attest that she got absolutely nothing from me other than a 30-plus page backhanded slap for the inconvenience and the audacity. Her interrogatory response, summarizing the evidence of what she described as a highly orchestrated smear campaign, reveals a surprising truth. What Lively primarily objects to is Baldoni's effort to defend himself, whether by promoting positive stories or trying to suppress negative ones. And I will say that's a bit of a recurring theme, because if you look at the recent motions for sanctions, especially in regards to Jamie Heath, the spoliation ones in general, and Melissa Nathan, she doesn't just want the information that's missing, that she claims is missing, because they are, some of them, they are thinly veiled motions to compel, absolutely. They're past the deadline. But she also asks the judge to do a jury instruction for presumption that what she's saying is proven, because she can't get the proof. She's asked, in Jamie Heath's case, she wants the judge to literally enter an order where Heath can't comment on what happened or defend himself. So I do believe that. But that is not retaliation. Indeed, redacted. Even when certain defendants contacted the press about Lively in August 2024, their efforts were far from the sophisticated internet takedown Lively touted in the press. The few instances in which the evidence suggests any defendant spoke to the press about Lively all involved truthful references to her actual conduct or to that of her husband, or the sharing of opinions about that conduct. Redacted. Lively has also long claimed defendants used a network of bots to bring her down. Contemporaneous documentary evidence shows that Baldoni himself repeatedly confirmed with both Abel and Nathan that they were not using bots or fake accounts. Nathan in particular assured Baldoni the backlash was organic. She's blown herself up by her own actions. Once media goes in, they go in. You did not do any of these. We did not do any of these. This is all organic. Baldoni later discussed with Nathan that he had no intention to make Lively an outcast and was praying for her and her family. Lively and Reynolds smeared Baldoni once again. Ironically, Lively's cry that Baldoni tried to bury her more accurately describes her own efforts to tar him. Beginning on August 9, 2024, just one day after Lively alleges the smear campaign began, redacted. 4 days later, redacted. Ooh, this is going to get exciting. Lively then used a sham litigation to obtain the private messages of Baldoni's publicist Jen Abel, using a shell company as a bogus plaintiff. This company filed claims against 10 anonymous Doe defendants and, working behind the scenes with Abel's former employer, Stephanie Jones, invoked a New York State's court subpoena power to obtain Wayfarer's confidential records from Abel's personal phone that Lively would not have otherwise been legally permitted to obtain. On December 21st, 2024, the New York Times published a 4,000-word article entitled "We Can Bury Anyone Inside a Hollywood Smear Machine" that relied on the documents Lively had obtained through the sham lawsuit, as well as an administrative complaint she filed the day prior. The article asserted Baldoni and Heath had violated Lively's physical boundaries and made sexual and other inappropriate comments to her, and then instituted a retaliatory smear campaign. Weeks before the article came out, redacted. Around the same time, Lively conveniently dropped her New York State court lawsuit, confirming it was not filed in good faith and had only been used as a ploy. Lively initiated this litigation. In December 2024, 18 months after the minor issues she raised about the on-set behavior were fully and successfully resolved, Lively launched this dispute with an administrative complaint and the fanfare of her New York Times headline. The behavior she previously regarded as not requiring any formal HR process was now presented by two large sophisticated global law firms as sexual harassment of the gravest kind. And Baldoni's natural defensive effort after being sidelined from his own premiere to manage his own and his film's reputation by employing experienced PR professionals was now recast as retaliation against Lively for raising purported sexual harassment concerns. Lively's numerous complaints against numerous defendants cannot withstand scrutiny. Judgment should be entered for defendants on all claims. Excellent. I do love this. So we had the argument. How are we doing? Okay. I appreciate we're already close to an hour in and there is still quite a bit of this document to go. I'm getting through it as quickly as possible, but I don't want to just read. I want to talk about points as they come up. Okay. It will be what it is. I guess these are long documents, so. Okay, so let's get into the argument. For the reasons set forth below, Lively's claims all fail. This motion also incorporates the arguments in defendant's motion for judgment on the pleadings, which was an incredible document. I loved it. Including that extraterritorial application of California statutes is improper because, as the undisputed facts show, no alleged instance of harassment took place there. Okay. Lively cannot prove any actionable sexual harassment. So I love that they're starting with the obvious. This court, as well as many others, have pointedly observed that in evaluating what constitutes actionable harassment or a hostile work environment, context matters. And they are quoting Judge Lyman. Comments made on the set of filming a movie about adult themes may have a different material effect from similar comments made in a routine office setting. Lively knowingly took on a lead role in a provocative, sexually charged film based on a book famous for its intense, intimate scenes. When viewed in context, no reasonable juror could find that the handful of comments and miscommunications Lively has mustered amounts to sexual harassment. Lively cannot prove severe and pervasive harassment. Title VII FIHA and the UNRWA Act do not address trivial slights nor prescribe a general civility code for the workplace. The litany of minor grievances Lively cobbles together falls far short of the requisite level of being severe or pervasive enough to create an objectively hostile or abusive work environment. In separating low-level objections from legally cognizable wrongs, courts consider the totality of circumstances. The frequency of the discriminatory conduct, its severity, whether it's physically threatening or humiliating or a mere offensive utterance, and whether it unreasonably interferes with an employee's work performance. It is not enough for Lively to say that she personally found something Baldoni or Heath did objectionable. Both an objective and a subjective standard must be met to sustain a claim. Lively's claims, premised on a few purportedly offensive utterances and on-set mishaps, do not satisfy these standards. That Baldoni, in directing particular scenes, twice used the adjective sexy to refer to how female actors appeared in their assigned wardrobe is hardly surprising given the sexually charged nature of the scenes in the film. The banality of such conduct and its general low-level offensiveness is underscored by Lively's redacted during her work on the film. Redacted. Video footage confirms that Baldoni's use of the word sexy in reference to Lively's wardrobe was entirely unremarkable. Lively was not scantily clad but overdressed in an oversized fleece onesie. And that video is it's not sealed. It is in the exhibit, so I will be looking at that. That will be a separate video though. Nor was this anything that might remotely approach flirtation. Rather, both she and Baldoni were working at the time surrounded by actors and crew. Baldoni's expression was neutral and not ogling or suggestive. On top of that, Baldoni apologized if his remark was inappropriate, and Lively responded by saying, "All good." Even in routine office settings, such conduct is not actionable. For example, the Second Circuit held a high school teacher's claims that her male supervisor occasionally commented on her physical appearance and participated in a bet with 3 other male employees as to when he would be able to engage her in sexually explicit conversation were insufficient. Lively's other complaints are equally deficient when viewed in context. It would be one thing if Lively and Baldoni were two insurance executives reviewing actuarial figures on a spreadsheet, and out of nowhere Baldoni alluded to his marital or sexual experiences or to a prior pornography addiction. It's quite another thing here because Lively and Baldoni were discussing these issues in the context of creating intimate scenes and adult themes in the film they were making together. Lively always had complete control in approving any additions to the script concerning intimacy as well as access to a female intimacy coordinator. And she raised no concerns throughout the entire period in which the movie's most intimate scenes were filmed. And they're great points. This is actually quite important. Lively always had complete control because it is harassment is quite, is largely based on a power imbalance. But she, by saying she had complete control, she was able to say no to what she wasn't happy with. She was able to work with a female intimacy coordinator about her boundaries. That's incredibly important point to make, and it does take the sting a little bit out of the suggestion that there was a situation where a typical harassment would take place. Quite often, it's the male boss who is harassing the female employee and using his power to do so, leveraging, I will fire you. You'll be overlooked for promotions. You won't get a bonus. And also same in the education setting, like a male professor with a female student. I will downgrade your mark. That kind of thing. But there was nothing being held over Lively. In fact, it was quite the other way around. Lively's complaint that Baldoni inquired about her weight similarly falls short. He didn't make the comment in the workplace or in the presence of any cast or crew or even Lively herself. It had no effect on the workplace environment. Someone else communicated it to Lively, not at Baldoni's request and independent of any activity related to the film. Oh, sorry, I've got a sore throat again. Reading all these. Lively was not targeted on the basis of her gender. And this is incredibly important. To sustain a sexual harassment claim, Lively must show that the offending conduct was motivated by her gender, that she was treated in a certain way because she was a woman. And if we in the video we'll watch of the sexy outfit in the onesies, Baldoni's hugging men just as much as he hugs women. Okay. The critical issue Title VII's text indicates is whether members of one sex are exposed to disadvantageous terms or conditions of employment to which members of the other sex are not exposed. Lively cannot show that here. The basis of many of her claims has nothing to do with her sex. For instance, Lively contends there was too much hugging on the set. She does not claim, let alone prove, that hugging was gender specific, which actually just makes the point I just made. There is actual video footage of Baldoni hugging men as much as women. Yeah, the next line. The undisputed evidence, including video footage, shows both men and women being hugged. He's a hugger. So, yeah, that's another very important point. Perhaps there was a general over-generosity of spirit among people on the set, but such facially sex-neutral incidents, even if they made Lively subjectively uncomfortable, do not create an environment that a reasonable person, Lively is not reasonable, would find hostile or abusive. And honestly, I say this as someone who has been in an abusive relationship, both, in the personal and in the workplace environment. If being hugged a little bit too much was enough to make her, and I'm quoting her here, unable to leave her home. So traumatized she's had to turn down work, lost profits on her brands, and most of the time she could not get out of bed. It had a detrimental effect on her husband's mental health. Her children are scarred for life. They will never be the same. If hugging a lot on set is enough to have done that to her, then it's bullshit. I'm just going to call it as it is. There's no way. And it's frustrating as well. Baldoni spoke with Lively about topics like sexuality, consent, and pornography, not motivated by her gender, but because she was his co-lead and collaborator in a film exploring adult themes. It is undisputed that Baldoni has spoken openly about such topics to large audiences of men as well as women, including in 2 published books and a frequently broadcast podcast. No evidence suggests he singled out anyone for differential treatment on the basis of gender. That's really important. Love this. Moreover, it is undisputed redacted. While redacted. Meanwhile, Lively advocated redacted. She redacted. She redacted. Sorry, I'm doing my best. Against the backdrop of a film devoted to achieving a certain sexy aesthetic, a project Lively embraced and advanced, it is impossible to see occasional sporadic references to sexuality as specifically directed towards either gender. Nor do the 2 alleged instances involving Heath reflect any gender motivation or animus. Lively was shown a fragment of a video depicting family members, male and female, and a newborn child, not because she was a woman, but because she had acted in an important birth-related scene in the film, the details of which she had been discussing with Baldoni. Heath had shown the same video to Baldoni, a man. Similarly, Lively asserts Heath inappropriately glanced at her after being invited into her makeup trailer while she was in a state of undress. Even crediting her account, there is no evidence Heath entered her trailer or did anything else for some untoward sexual reason. Before this dispute arose, Lively herself dismissed the idea, telling Heath, "I know you weren't trying to cop a look." Lively relies on the fallacious assumption that any unwelcome reference to sex or sexuality is gender discrimination. That is not the law. Exposure to overtly sexual conduct far more egregious than that alleged here is not actionable if not specifically motivated by gender. Okay. Okay, but yeah. Defendants completely remediated any allegedly offensive behavior. Lively is also unable to show pervasive harassment because any concern she raised, whether justified or not, was promptly addressed and rectified. Indeed, when filming resumed after Lively had raised a set of requests or protections, it proceeded without issue or incident. A reasonable employee would hardly be able to find their workplace to be pervasively discriminatory if their employer actively took successful steps to protect them from abuse. Yeah. That's a great point. That's a great point. In agreeing to those protections, on top of all the other protections, how is your employer harassing you, abusing you, if they're protecting you? Lively does not claim there was any misstep or misdeed by anyone on set after her June 1st, 2023 meeting with Heath and Baldoni. Indeed, before Lively unleashed her battery of high-powered law firms, she herself redacted. Her agent visited the set and redacted. It is difficult to see how such relatively minor alleged transgressions, all indisputably nipped in the bud while production continued, can support the massive litigation Lively has brought here. Indeed, that is precisely why one of redacted. Okay, so the next part is Lively cannot prove any actionable retaliation. Lively did not experience any actionable adverse action. To sustain a retaliation claim, Lively must prove, among other things, that she suffered an adverse action. And this goes back to what I said earlier. Without the, a smear campaign, smearing something on someone on their own, with no harassment in this case, is not illegal or actionable. Lively needs the sexual harassment, and then to prove that the smear campaign is retaliation because she spoke out about sexual harassment. There are dots to join. She cannot just say, well, they're smearing me, and I once claimed sometime that there was sexual harassment, so, that's all I need. It's not the case. So, very good point. Under Title 7, I'm just checking it. Right, okay. Yeah, under Title 7, an adverse action must include conduct that would dissuade a reasonable worker from making or supporting a charge of discrimination. California's FIHA statute and Section 1102.5 of the California Whistleblower Statute, upon which Lively relies, define a qualifying adverse action even more narrowly. They require that the adverse action be employment-related. That is, it must materially affect the terms, conditions, or privileges of employment. So, and they're about to break down all the ways that is not the case. 1. Lively did not suffer any employment-related adverse action. No aspect of Lively's employment changed for the worse after she presented her list of requested protections. And that is important. She was not demoted, sidelined, or paid less. To the contrary, her power in the workplace and control over the production both expanded dramatically. Love it. So, by her own account, redacted, among many other things, no reasonable juror could find that Lively suffered an adverse employment action in any traditional sense. Rather than retaliate against her, defendants acceded to her every demand, providing her with a career. There is redacted, but it's clearly going to be in reference to the PGA credit now she now has. 2. The only proven publicity efforts were reasonable defensive measures. In lieu of a traditional adverse action, Lively claims that the retaliation against her took the form of a barrage of negative publicity outside the workplace and after all of her on-set work was done. Nothing defendants did can fairly be described as retaliation for Lively's engagement in any protected activity. Instead, Baldoni and Wayfarer were reasonably attempting to protect themselves in response to an onslaught of vicious, negative publicity launched by Lively and her famous husband. Defendants were exercising First Amendment and due process rights, not stepping on Lively's earlier exercised right to voice concerns in the workplace, which they had honoured in full. Even if defendants' conduct in late 2024 somehow could stretch back to workplace concerns raised over a year before, there would still be no actionable harassment. This court knows well that parties accused of harassment are permitted to defend themselves. The Second Circuit has recognized that such reasonable defensive measures do not violate the anti-retaliation provision of Title VII. Defendants' publicity efforts, even if construed in their worst possible light, are precisely the type of reasonable defensive measures outside the scope of actionable retaliation. Yep. It is neither against the law nor retaliatory for Baldoni to put out positive press about himself or to attempt to mitigate or suppress any negative stories that might arise. That is classic PR activity. Nor is pointing journalists to pre-existing negative coverage of Lively actionable. Because there's so much, I am going to skip over a lot of the case citations. Here, Lively has been unable to identify any instance in which any defendant provided false information about Lively to any member of the press or to any social media influencer. Lively has never asserted defamation claims against Abel, Nathan Tagg, or any other member of Wayfarer's PR team. Her defamation claims against Wayfarer, Heath, and Baldoni conspicuously failed to identify any statements made in August 2024, when the alleged smear campaign was supposedly in full swing. And I just kind of want to say, it's not mentioned here, Wallace is not brought up here, but when he was dismissed, there was a question mark, I guess. When I say dismissed the second time, I mean, there was a bit of a question mark. Could Lively reframe the claims as defamation? And very clearly, no, because he has not made statements. Lively has never alleged defamation against Jed Wallace because there are no statements that she can point to. And, the defamation needs to be some kind of statement made publicly, which, impugns the reputation. And that statement has to be false. And the reason false light requires actions that, portray someone falsely in a negative light and damage their reputation. And that is why she has pursued false light against Jed Wallace and not defamation, because there are no statements. I just kind of wanted to take that kind of moment to say that. Okay. So footnote here. Lively has also claimed defendants engaged in sophisticated digital warfare against her. Although Lively will no doubt assert the facts are contested, discovery establishes that digital warfare never happened. In August 2024, long before this dispute, Baldoni repeatedly asked his PR team if they were using bots or fake accounts to foment negative sentiment against Lively, and they assured him they were not. So there's a lot redacted. Such posts are not false by any measure. Redacted. No one has disputed, however, that the interview actually occurred. That might be Shusty's interview they may be referring to there. I don't know, but if they are talking about, I don't know, it might not be. I don't know. The Second Circuit emphasizes that context matters when assessing retaliation claims, just as it does for substantive harassment claims. And a plaintiff's own behavior in the face of purported retaliation has to be considered. Lively undisputably started the publicity fight, and her reaction to even the hint of any defensive response showed she remained an eager participant on that battlefield. Yeah, that's absolutely fair. Absolutely fair. As early as August 9th, 2024, virtually the same date Lively claims the purported smear campaign began, Lively redacted. 4 days later, on August 13th, redacted. Lively and her team filed a bogus lawsuit in New York State Court and then subsequently worked with the New York Times to publish a 4,000-word article about Baldoni's purported misconduct based on numerous private and cherry-picked texts improperly seized from Jen Abel's phone. This aggressive response itself shows the media activity transcended not only the workplace but the bounds of workplace anti-discrimination laws. I like that. I like that they have brought up her aggressive tactics. Next, Lively cannot prove any protected activity was the but-for cause of the alleged smear campaign. And this is important. This is the concept of causation. So even if it was true that in May 2023, Lively had made a complaint of sexual harassment, even a justifiable one that met the threshold for sexual harassment, she has to then prove that any retaliation 14 months later in August 2024 was as a result of there was some kind of connection, and it happened because she spoke up about her sexual harassment 14 months earlier. So even with a genuine sexual harassment complaint, she still has to make the connection between that and her perceived retaliation. Lively's retaliation claims also fail for the separate and independent reason that she cannot prove any temporal or causal proximity between defendants' alleged publicity efforts and the list of protections she presented many months before. To establish a causal link between her protected activity and defendants' allegedly adverse action, Lively must prove the retaliation was a but-for cause of the employer's adverse action. It is not enough that retaliation was a substantial or motivating factor in the employer's decision. Rather, Lively must prove that the negative publicity campaign would not have happened absent a desire to retaliate against her for her complaints. She cannot do so here. Okay. My mouth's getting dry. This is such a lot. Okay. There is there is no temporal proximity between any claimed protected activity and any alleged adverse action. It is undisputed that Lively faced no real consequences for at least 8 months after presenting her protections demands. So let's have a look at the footnote. Lively claimed during her deposition, redacted, and redacted. Neither of these events resulted in any material harm to Lively or the conditions of her employment. Moreover, around the same time, Lively redacted. In any event, Lively didn't raise those incidents in her administrative complaint and has thus failed to exhaust her administrative remedies. Oh, I want to see this unredacted, I really do. On the contrary, filming resumed, including filming of all of Lively's intimate scenes, without incident, and she alleges no act of retaliation during the subsequent months of editing. The long temporal gap between her protected activity and an alleged instance of retaliation alone defeats her claims. Yeah, and I do agree. 2. Lively cannot prove proximate cause. Significant intervening events between Lively's claimed protected activity and the alleged smear campaign also destroy any inference of causation, especially the but-for causation required here. It is ridiculous to suggest that but for Lively's airing of protections some 8 months earlier, defendants would not have hired PR professionals to help manage their reputations. Defendants would have reacted to Lively's onslaught of negative press against them even if no concerns about their on-set behaviour had ever been raised. They had a legitimate interest in protecting their reputations, and the reception of their film after Lively isolated Baldoni from the rest of the cast and snubbed him at the film's premiere. These developments eviscerate any inference of but-for causation relating to events in the distant past. Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so now we're going to get into Lively's employment status. Lively was an independent contractor, not an employee. Title VII covers employees, not independent contractors. California Labor Code, Section 1102.5 is no broader. By its plain terms, it does not protect independent contractors. Lively, a world-famous actor who ran her own business empire and relied on lawyers to negotiate a detailed contract on behalf of a specialized LLC for her work, plainly wasn't a standard employee. Lively was not beholden to any employer. She controlled the terms and conditions of the work she performed to an extraordinary degree. And I love what they're about to go with here. She moved the location of the film, changed the filming schedule, led meetings at her own personal residence, and demanded numerous terms and conditions without which she refused to go forward. If sexual harassment law is designed to address a power differential, her star power gave her the upper hand. She came to exercise such immense control that redacted, and there's a PGA letter there, so it's clearly pointing, that's referencing all the things that Lively, managed to get. She had so much control over the film that Wayfarer were able to successfully write a recommendation for the PGA credit. In determining whether an individual qualifies as an employee under Title VII, courts look to 13 non-exhaustive factors drawn from common law. California law ordinarily presumes individuals are employees, but California Labor Code, Section 2776A, provides a different standard where, as here, there is a bona fide business-to-business contracting relationship. The existence of a business-to-business relationship depends on factors that substantially overlap with factors articulated below. Since the terms of Blakel's payment were negotiated and set out in written agreements, that common law test applies. Common law factors strongly weigh against treating Lively as an employee. Did any defendant have the right to control the manner and means by which the product is accomplished? And the answer is no. Lively exercised control at every turn. Redacted. She reserved the right not to perform in any intimate scene to which she did not consent. She determined the filming location and schedule, took over significant aspects of the script and editing process as redacted. She refused to move forward, including when presenting her list of protections, unless others acceded to the terms and conditions she imposed. Was a high level of skill required for Lively's work? And I want to giggle. No, I'm going to. But they actually say yes. Lively was an A-list actor. She touts many skills and accomplishments in her letter to the PGA. She bargained for a $1.75 million guaranteed payout, as well as additional bonuses, including a box office bonus that was required to be no less favorable than Justin Baldoni's. Who was the source of the instrumentalities and tools? Lively herself was the primary instrumentality of the acting work she performed. While Wayfarer and It Ends With Us movie arranged for the set and paid for ancillary materials associated with production, Lively made decisions and exercised creative control. She claimed credit for, among other things, redacted. Who chose the location of the work? Lively told redacted. She insisted shooting switch from Boston, where the film was set, to New Jersey, a location more convenient to her home. She retained pre-approval rights as to any shoots in other locations. What was the duration of the relationship between the parties, and could any defendant assign additional projects to Lively? The relationship was limited to the duration of a single project, the film. Did Lively have discretion over when and how long to work? Yes. That was an extensively negotiated aspect of the offer letter and the never executed ALA. Under the financial terms in the unexecuted ALA, Lively was also entitled to receive payment for any day she worked beyond the agreed-on schedule at a weekly rate of $291,667.67. Wow. What method of payment was used? Lively's loan-out entity was paid her minimum guaranteed payment in 6 installments pursuant to an escrow agreement, with additional bonuses contingent on the film's success. What was Lively's role in hiring and paying assistants? It was extensive. Lively claims she personally redacted. This is going to be all the composers, the producers, the songs. Oh. Lively claims she personally redacted. She was also redacted. Under the unexecuted ALA, Lively would have also had the right to select her personal assistants, nannies, and securities. She could also pick the cars, the planes, the hotel rooms. I mean, what she could do, the control she had was nuts. It was absolutely wild. I mean, if Wayfarer does want to do the second movie, I'm available, with these options, and I will not falsely accuse them of sexual harassment at the end of it all. I can't believe the way she's acted. So entitled. There are people who would literally give their right arm for opportunities that she was given here. Were defendants in business, and was the work part of their regular business? Yes, defendants were in the business of producing films, but it was not as if Lively walked into a pre-existing business and simply followed their rules. By her own account, she transformed the entire production process. The fact that a party was in business indicates nothing about whether plaintiff was an employee in that business. Did Lively receive employee benefits like health insurance? No, and she wouldn't need to. She did get a lot of money towards meal plans and personal trainer. And I think she was entitled to something like, she could have a physical for certain things at certain points as well, that was all paid for. How was Lively treated for tax purposes? Not like a standard W-2 employee, as required by New Jersey law for all films shot in the state. It ends with this movie withheld a 6.37% tax from its payments to Lively's loan-out entity, but it did not withhold federal, state, or local income tax or Social Security or Medicare taxes. Moreover, the very fact that Lively now claims redacted in lost profits for her various companies demonstrates that she was in business for herself, not for any defendant. Yes. Yes. I do like that. Oh. Where are we? Right. Lively cannot prove a failure to investigate a claim. Lively asserts that the ends with us and Wayfarer as employer entities violated 2 provisions of FIHA. California Governing Code, Section 12940J1 and Section 12940K, by allegedly failing to take reasonable steps to prevent or investigate harassment regarding their employees. As a preliminary matter, Lively cannot assert these claims, which by its terms, as relevant here, is strictly limited to the employer-employee context. In any event, libraries claim that defendants failed to prevent or investigate harassment would fail on the merits under either provision because she cannot establish the elements of such a claim, namely that there was, in fact, a substantive PIHA violation, defendants failed to take reasonable steps to prevent it, or that any such failure by defendants caused Lively any harm. First, insofar as nothing Lively experienced rose to the level of actionable harassment or retaliation, defendants had no corresponding obligation to prevent or investigate. Per regulations promulgated, can't speak today. Per regulations promulgated, there can be no standalone employer liability for failure to take reasonable steps unless the plaintiff also pleads and prevails on the underlying claim of discrimination, harassment, or retaliation. Second, undisputed facts show defendants took all reasonable steps to prevent harassment from occurring, thereby fulfilling their statutory obligations. The reasonableness of any employer's measures depends on the context. Okay. I'm going to skip over some of this. Right. Under Title VII, adoption of an anti-harassment policy and efforts to disseminate the policy to its employees established that the employer exercised reasonable care to prevent sexual harassment. Wayfarer took each of those measures. It had a separate HR department as well as an employee handbook with clear anti-discrimination, harassment, or retaliation policies. Pursuant to these policies, individuals who believed they had experienced harassment were invited to discuss their concerns with their immediate supervisor, any member or management, or human resources. It ends with this movie also held an anti-harassment training administered by an outside law firm during pre-production and provided call sheets with a hotline for workplace complaints. I mean, they're already doing quite a lot, more than some employers do. Lively may argue defendants failed to act reasonably because no formal investigation into issues she raised took place. Yet Lively herself conceded it was reasonable for defendants to forego any investigation. Her lawyer offered a proposed list of protections in lieu of a more formal HR process. That's a really good point. That's actually a really good point. The legal significance of her specific request not to investigate is that it shows defendants' alleged decision not to do so was perfectly reasonable. Third, Lively cannot prove, as she must, that any technical failure to investigate or remediate was a substantial factor in causing her purported harm. No formal investigation would have made any difference because defendants simply acceded to Lively's requested protections and demands. Filming continued thereafter without issue or incident in what Lively described as a completely safe and professional environment. No deficiency in the remedial apparatus of Wayfarer or of It Ends With Us movie contributed to Lively's alleged harm. She claims she was injured primarily by an alleged smear campaign that took place well after Wayfarer and It Ends With Us movie were no longer responsible for supervising on-set behaviour relating to the film. I love that. That whole paragraph is brilliant. This is a really good document so far. I love it. Right. Lively cannot prove aiding and abetting claims. Lively claims Abel, Nathan, and Tag, and obviously Jed Wallace is now out of this, so otherwise he would have been here, aided and abetted harassment and retaliation in violation of PIHA. This claim for secondary liability cannot stand because there is no primary liability. For reasons stated above, no actionable harassment or retaliation occurred. The record is especially deficient as to any claim that Abel, Nathan, or Tag aided and abetted any harassment. That alleged conduct occurred during or before June 2023. Nathan's company Tag was not retained until August 2024, more than a year later. And there is no evidence that Abel substantially assisted or encouraged anyone to sexually harass Lively at any point in time either. That was short and sweet, but very much to the point. I don't see how Lively can counter that. Lively's contract claims fail. Lively's contract claims against the Ends With Us movie and Wayfarer, the entity defendants, are based on two putative agreements, what she calls the Actor Loan-Out Agreement and the Contract Rider Agreement. But neither is enforceable by Lively. The ALA was expressly subject to multiple conditions precedent that were never fulfilled, and no final agreement was ever reached or signed with respect to its material terms. The CRA was, by its terms, to be incorporated into the unexecuted ALA as an amendment. It was therefore subject to the same unsatisfied conditions precedents and incomplete formation, and was also not independently supported by valid consideration. And even if the ALA and CRA were enforceable, Lively's claims would still fail for multiple reasons. 1. Lively cannot enforce the Actor Loan-Out Agreement. Any condition precedent in a contract must be performed before the promisor's duty of performance arises. Before liability can arise on a promise qualified by conditions expressed or implied in fact, such conditions must be fulfilled. I've got a footnote. The draft ALA contains a California choice of law provision, but such contractual provisions do not apply to the question of whether a valid contract was formed. The choice of law question is largely irrelevant here because Lively cannot show the ALA is valid or enforceable under either New York or California law. It is undisputed that the parties never executed the ALA, nor agreed on its final terms, and Lively never signed the inducement, each of which was a condition precedent to It Ends With Us movie's obligations. Nor were these express conditions waived. Indeed, It Ends With Us movie's representatives flatly refused to remove these conditions precedent. Redacted. If anything, redacted is compelling evidence Lively knew It Ends With Us movies had not waived compliance with the conditions precedent. I'd love to know what that is. For substantially the same reasons, the draft ALA was never a binding agreement. When it is clear that both parties contemplate that acceptance of a contract's terms would be signified in writing, the failure to sign the agreement means that no binding contract is created. Here, the undisputed facts show that the parties communicated an intent not to be bound absent a full execution via 1. The clear condition precedent language in the draft ALA, which It Ends With Us movie refused to remove. 2. It Ends With Us movie continued efforts to obtain Lively's signature through July 2024 and her continuing refusal to provide it as a manifestation of her acceptance. And 3. The entire agreement provision of the draft ALA as well as the similar provision in the standard terms. Only 20 pages left. Nor do the facts establish that the draft ALA remained unexecuted simply as a matter of neglect or convenience after the final terms were definitively agreed to by the parties. To the contrary, the undisputed facts establish that the parties continued to negotiate material terms until July 2024, and no final agreement was ever reached. Even the sexual harassment provision, i.e. the provision Lively claims was breached, remained subject to revisions when the last draft was exchanged. To the extent any binding agreement enforceable by Lively was arguably formed, its terms were those set forth in the offer letter, which was fully negotiated and agreed upon in May 2023, not in the ALA, the terms of which were never finalised. It Ends With Us movie does not dispute that, consistent with the offer letter, it placed Lively's upfront fee into escrow and accepted Lively's services on the first phase of filming. Critically, however, the offer letter does not contain the provisions that Lively says were breached. Thus, whatever the validity of the offer letter and Lively's right to enforce it, that letter cannot salvage Lively's fatally defective breach claims, which stand outside the letter's plain text. Lively cannot enforce the contract rider agreement, even though it was fully executed, because it was expressly made part of the ALA, and Lively's right to enforce the CRA was subject to the same unsatisfied execution conditions precedent and incomplete formation of that agreement. The CRA was not intended as a standalone agreement independent of the ALA. Rather, by its terms, it provided additional terms and conditions in connection with artist services and was deemed incorporated into the ALA. Nothing in the CRA suggests its provisions could be enforced independently of the unexecuted ALA. Moreover, the very existence of the CRA demonstrates that the parties were still negotiating the ALA and seeking to amend and supplement its terms. The CRA's plain text shows it was intended to be integrated as part of any final ALA, but there is more. The conduct of Lively's counsel confirms the parties' understanding that, even though the CRA was finalised first, the CRA was to be an ancillary amendment to the unfinalised, unexecuted ALA after the CRA, which the negotiators referred to as a side letter, was finalised. The parties renewed their efforts to finalise the ALA, and Lively's counsel continued to edit the standard terms to be included therein, stating such terms were to be incorporated into the underlying agreement as amended. Let's see how much of this is actual. Okay, we'll go right to the wire then. The CRA is also unenforceable as an independent agreement because it is not supported by any valid consideration from Lively. The CRA is silent with respect to any further obligation or forbearance on her behalf. The only arguable consideration supporting the CRA was Lively's promise to fulfill her pre-existing obligation under the terms of the offer letter to perform as Lily in the film, for which It Ends With Us movie had already paid Lively's full upfront fee into escrow. Nor can past consideration support a new contractual obligation. The plain language of the CRA confirms that the purported consideration for the deal was to cause artists to render acting services on the picture. But that was the exact same obligation It Ends With Us movie had already paid Lively to perform months earlier by placing her fee into her WME trust account. And to the extent Lively reneged on her obligations without returning her fee, she would have been liable for a breach of the offer letter or at minimum for unjust enrichment. The CRA's boilerplate recitation that good and valuable consideration was exchanged is beside the point. As such, recitals cannot overcome an absence of real-world consideration. Although Lively's counsel vaguely alluded in email correspondence to the possibility of foregoing a more formal HR process when she initially proposed the 17 protections for return to production, she was explicit that Lively was not, in fact, agreeing to forego or even delay any claim and instead reserved all legal rights. Moreover, the CRA itself included no term embodying a promise that Lively would forego or delay any claim. This sort of illusory promise, which is so insubstantial as to impose no obligation, is not valid consideration. Even if the ALA and CRA were enforceable against the entity independents, Lively's breach claims would fail as a matter of law. The entity defendants did not engage in conduct rising to a breach. Both of Lively's breach claims turn on the contention that It Ends With Us movie, through its agents, sexually harassed Lively and then retaliated against her for raising concerns. As discussed above, Lively does not come close to establishing a genuine issue of fact as to any such claim. The entity defendant's alleged conduct cannot constitute a breach because Lively failed to provide notice and an opportunity to cure. Lively's breach claims also fail because she failed to provide 30 days notice and an opportunity to cure as required by the ALA's company's breach provision, which also governs the incorporated CRA. That provision states that no act or omission of company It Ends With Us movie hereunder shall constitute an event of default or breach of this agreement unless artist Lively shall first notify company in writing, setting forth such alleged breach or default, and company shall not cure the same within 30 days after receipt of such notice. Lively never provided the requisite notice and opportunity to cure before asserting her breach of contract claims. To be sure, Lively's attorneys sent a cease and desist letter on December 20th, 2024, claiming that Wayfarer and others breached the CRA. But that letter was not addressed to It Ends With Us movies. Love it. Right, okay. Yeah, but that letter was not addressed to It Ends With Us movie as required by the contractual notice provision and did not mention any alleged breach of the ALA. In any case, Lively filed her breach claims on December 31st, 2024, only 11 days after sending the cease and desist letter, far less than the contractually mandated 30-day period. The only arguably relevant notice Lively delivered with respect to the ALA was the November 2023 email in which her counsel presented It Ends With Us movie's counsel with the protections for return to production. But that email did not set forth any alleged breach as required under the ALA's notice and cure provision. It was therefore insufficient under the language of the putative contract. And as discussed below, any arguable breach alleged in that email was cured. This is really good. This is really good. By its terms, the ALA and incorporated CRA provide that no breach can arise absent notice and an opportunity to cure. As such, the provision of the agreement that defines a breach is not ambiguous. The clear and explicit meaning of the provision is that a party may be held in breach of the agreement only after receiving written notice of breach from the other party and failing to cure the breach within 30 days of receiving that notice. Because there is nothing in the record showing Lively provided It Ends With Us movie with such notice of breach, or that she accorded It Ends With Us movie 30 days to cure the alleged breach as expressly required under the agreement, there was no cognizable breach by the entity defendants. I'm not even sure how she's going to argue that, because that is absolutely spot on. That's great legal arguments. I really love this. Even if notice were provided via Lively's counsel November 2023 email, the entity defendants indisputably cured any potential breach based on alleged sexual harassment. Pretty sure my voice is starting to go now. Sorry, guys. It is undisputed that when work resumed after the writer's strike and following receipt of Lively's list of protections, there was no recurrence of any alleged impropriety. Work on the set proceeded without issue or incident, without a single concern raised about even a single item that might give rise to a potentially hostile work environment. As a result, any source of discomfort that could arguably give rise to a claim for sexual harassment had been completely cured. Per the notice and cure provision underlying both the ALA and CRA, any noticed sexually harassing conduct having been cured cannot constitute a breach. While Lively claims separately that the ALA and CRA were breached based on acts of retaliation, there was no actionable retaliation, let alone temporal or causal nexus between the alleged retaliation and any concerns Lively had raised in an altogether different context and at an altogether different stage many months before. Even if there was a breach by It Ends With Us movie, Wayfarer would not be liable because Lively cannot establish alter ego liability. Lively's breach claims against Wayfarer suffer from an even more obvious defect. Wayfarer was not a party to the putative agreements and therefore cannot be liable for any breach thereof. Under California law, only a signatory to a contract may be liable for any breach. Lively's implicit contention that Wayfarer is liable for breach as It Ends With Us movie's alter ego is unavailing because a member or manager of an LLC cannot be held liable for the debts, obligations, or other liabilities of the LLC, whether arising in contract or otherwise, solely by reason of his status as a member or manager. Rather, the party seeking to have the corporate entity disregarded bears the burden of proving that the alter ego theory should be applied. Alter ego is an extreme remedy and is sparingly used. Courts apply the doctrine when the corporate form is used to perpetrate a fraud, circumvent a statute, or accomplish some other wrongful or inequitable purpose. So this alter ego doctrine, in theory, could be used against Ryan Reynolds for Van Zandt. Lively cannot prove that Wayfarer should be liable as It Ends With Us movie's alter ego. First, no inequitable result would follow from recognizing the corporate form. Establishing inequity requires direct evidence of specific manipulative conduct, which must include some conduct amounting to bad faith. Without something more, simply availing oneself of the protections provided by corporate charters is not misconduct sufficient to justify a court in finding a corporation be an alter ego. There was no manipulative conduct by Wayfarer or It Ends With Us movie here. Lively was represented by sophisticated entertainment counsel during her negotiations with It Ends With Us movie, and her counsel knew that the contractual counterparty would be a designated production service entity. Ultimately, it ends with us movie, not Wayfarer itself, as is customary in the film industry. Indeed, it was Lively's counsel who redlined the offer letter to substitute It Ends With Us movie as producer, whereas the initial draft had been defined producer as Wayfarer Studios or its designated production service entity. Any suggestion that it was manipulative or bad faith for It Ends With Us movie to be the counterparty is also belied by Lively's own use of a loan-out company, Blakell Inc., as counterparty to the alleged agreements. Second, Lively cannot establish It Ends With Us movie and Wayfarer had such unity of interest and ownership that the separate personalities of the corporation and the member no longer exist. It Ends With Us movie maintained its own separate bank accounts and funds and had its own counsel and independently engaged the cast and crew of the film, only a few of whom were Wayfarer employees. Although Wayfarer and its employees provided some support to It Ends With Us movie on the film, that is common in the film industry, and It Ends With Us movie paid Wayfarer redacted for those services. Redacted. Lively's alleged damages for breach are barred by the limitations on damages provision of the ALA and are not cognizable in any case. Even if Lively could establish a triable fact on her breach of contract claims, most, if not all, her asserted damages would be barred by the ALA's limitations on damages clause, which excludes consequential and/or incidental and/or special and/or punitive damages. Although California law prohibits pre-dispute limitations on damages for willful injury to the person or property of another, that principle does not preclude parties from limiting their liability for pure breaches of contract, like those at issue here. Here, if any, of Lively's asserted injury Here, little, if any, of Lively's asserted injury consists of general damages, i.e., damages that flow directly and necessarily from a breach of contract, or that are a natural result of a breach. Rather, nearly all of Lively's asserted damages are paradigmatic, consequential, incidental, or special damages, i.e., secondary or derivative losses arising from circumstances that are particular to the contract or to the parties. Lively's claims, for instance, that defendant's conduct caused associated businesses to suffer redacted in lost profits. She also claims redacted more in lost profits, which Lively refers to as lost earnings from the speculative loss of entertainment deals with third parties. Lively also claims redacted from reputational harm, which appears to be simply double counting of her alleged future profits. None of these damages flow directly or necessarily from the entity defendant's alleged breaches. They are instead secondary or derivative losses based on Lively's particular circumstances, namely her expectation of obtaining income from her affiliated businesses and subsequent entertainment-related contracts with third parties. So footnote here. Moreover, the limitation on liability in the ALA should not be treated as pre-dispute because it remained in the draft agreement after Lively raised the concerns resulting in the execution of the CRA, and the parties subsequently continued to negotiate terms. Under California law, lost profits can constitute direct damages only where the profits were lost, where the profits lost were due under the breach contract itself, not future or unidentified contracts. Lively does not contend that any of her lost profits are monies owed by defendants under the contract. Thus, the lost profits Lively seeks are at best characterized as consequential, not general damages, and are expressly barred by the ALA. Thus, my mouth is getting going numb now. Thus, Lively's lost profits, lost wages, and reputational harm are all consequential, incidental, or special damages and barred under the limitations on damages provision. Lively's only alleged damages that do not fall into the bucket of consequential, special, incidental, punitive damages are her alleged pain and suffering, physical pain and humiliation. And I did ask the question, what physical pain? From calling her character's wardrobe sexy, or asking her personal trainer about her weight? What physical pain are we talking about? It is unclear whether Lively contends these are proper damages for her breach claims as opposed to her tort claims. To the extent she does, her contention is barred because such damages are not available for breach of contract. Thus, Lively has failed to satisfy damages, which is a necessary element for a breach of contract. Right, great. We are about to move into the actual causes of action. So this is the last bit on the breach of contract claim. Thank God. Lively's contract claims are improperly duplicative. Even if Lively's contract claims had merit, they would be subject to dismissal because they merely duplicate her harassment and retaliation claims. Tort claims generally are not duplicative of contract claims because tort claims offer a separate measure of recovery. However, a claim is duplicative if it seeks the same damages or relief already sought by another claim. Here, however, Lively's theory of damages for her contract claims and her statutory/tort claims are entirely overlapping. Lively is not entitled to double recovery, i.e. tort damages plus contract damages, for the same injury by pleading both tort and breach of contract claims. Because she cannot establish any independent damages for the alleged breach, her contract claims should be dismissed. Yep. The defamation and false light claims fail. Where are we now? What page? 62. New York law applies to Lively's defamation and false light claims. A federal court sitting in diversity or adjudicating state law claims that are pendant to a federal claim must apply the choice of law rules of the forum state. Here there are conflicts. New York does not recognize a cause of action for false light invasion of privacy. New York and California defamation law, while similar, also conflict in certain respects. In tort cases, New York applies the law of state with the most significant interest in the litigation. In a multi-state defamation case, the plaintiff's domicile will usually have the most significant relationship to the case, and its law will therefore govern. This is the presumptive rule, which is overcome only if some other state has a more significant relationship, after taking into account where the plaintiff suffered the greatest injury, where the statements emanated and were broadcast, where the activities to which the allegedly defamatory statements took place, and the policy interests of the state whose law might apply. All factors support application of New York law. First, Lively resides in New York, and as New York law recognizes, a plaintiff's home state is where plaintiff's reputation is most likely damaged. While Lively complains about statements heard, viewed, or read millions of times around the world, the harm she complains of is personal harm in New York, including to her reputation in the community as well as grief and anxiety. Lively also filed suit in New York based on allegations that all defendants transact and solicit business within the state, have committed the tortious acts described in this complaint within the state, and or have committed such acts outside of the state, causing injury to plaintiff within the state. Second, the complaint of statements largely emanated from New York, Lively's allegations are largely based on statements disseminated through publications and other media outlets headquartered or based in New York, including the New York Post, the New York Times, USA Today, People Magazine, Page Six, and The Megyn Kelly Show. New York has a strong interest in establishing defamation standards for media outlets domiciled in the state. You can see what happened here. So she's amended her complaint, done her second amended complaint, made it all about New York for the benefit of Jed Wallace. She is trying to assert California law applies to the Wayfarer defenders because obviously she wants the FEHA laws to apply and the harassment, sexual harassment protections. And Wayfarer have gone, yeah, but you argued for New York. We agree. Okay. Third, the allegedly defamatory statements refer to activities in New York and its environs. Lively alleges defendants launched a coordinated campaign to cast her in false light during the publicity and promotion of the film and thereafter, and points to statements related to conduct on set. The film was primarily shot in New Jersey, and the premiere and some pre-production took place in New York. Many of the statements concern responses to the New York Times article about the dispute or the allegations filed in this court. The only relation to California is the general involvement of Hollywood's entertainment industry and the fact that 2 uneventful days of shooting took place there after Lively's concerns were resolved. But certain that not all defendants reside there, and that Lively filed an administrative complaint there after the fact. This fact pattern favours New York to a greater degree here than in Kinsey, where the underlying events had no connection to New York whatsoever. Finally, New York clearly has an interest in protecting its citizens, like Lively, from defamatory conduct, an interest not outweighed by any other states. Lively's false light claim fails. The false light claim cannot proceed because New York law applies, and New York does not recognize the tort of false light invasion of privacy. Summary judgment on that claim must be entered for defendants. Lively has no standing to bring a false light claim. Even if California law applies, Lively lacks standing. The false light claim arises from Article I, Section 1 of the California Constitution. But the California Constitution expressly grants Californians a right of privacy and thus does not apply to Lively, who resides in New York. Because Lively is not a California resident, she may not bring an invasion of privacy claim under California Constitution. Lively's defamation claim fails as a matter of law. Nor can Lively establish a tribal issue for her defamation claim. Lively generally contends that Wayfarer, Baldoni, and Heath, the defamation defendants, through their agents, published false statements asserting that Lively's allegations of harassment filed with the California CRD and this court were false and fabricated. That is, Lively's defamation claim is, by definition, based entirely on statements about the litigation published after litigation commenced. This claim fails for multiple reasons. And I can feel Judge Lyman's own reasoning to dismiss Wayfarer's defamation claims against Lively coming back. Lively cannot prove falsity or malice. Lively's defamation claim fails because it is premised on the conceit that her harassment and retaliation allegations are true, and any contrary statements false. But as explained above, Lively's claims and allegations do not rise to the level of harassment, and no retaliation for complaints of harassment occurred. It is axiomatic that truth is an absolute and unqualified defense to a civil defamation action, and that substantial truth is all that is required. The defamation defendant's statements denying the truth of Lively's allegations and asserting, for example, that the claims are completely false, were true, or at minimum, substantially true. Lively's claim therefore fails as a matter of law. Just as significantly, defendants' alleged statements denying the truth and validity of Lively's claims and allegations were not statements of objective fact, and therefore cannot constitute defamation as a matter of law. The Second Circuit confirmed just last week that whether the conduct rises to the level of harassment and what is meant by the term is often a subjective inquiry that permits different opinions among those involved in or aware of the alleged conduct. Statements about whether or not there is any smear campaign are, for the same reason, not actionable. Smear campaign lacks any precise, definitive meaning such that statements denying the existence of such a campaign reflect constitutionally protected opinion. Likewise, assertions that, for example, Lively was pushing her own self-serving, selfish vendetta and her claims were outrageous and intentionally salacious, are likewise precisely the sort of opinion statement that cannot be objectively proven and is therefore not an actionable basis for a defamation claim. For substantially the same reasons, Lively cannot prove the requisite malice. As a public figure, for purposes of First Amendment analysis, Lively must demonstrate with clear and convincing evidence, which no one has seen yet, that the defendant realized their statement was false or that they subjectively entertained serious doubt as to the truth of their statement. Lively contends that the defamation defendants knew her allegations were accurate because they signed the CRA and knew that Miss Lively was not alone. The CRA was not, by its terms, an acknowledgement of any past conduct. It was expressly forward-looking. So the CRA, obviously, just to remind you, is the 17-point document. But even accepting Lively's spin on the document, it shows at most that defendants knew complaints were raised, not that the complaints were true. Excellent. The allegedly defamatory statements were absolutely privileged. Lively's defamation claim also fails because it is based on statements that are absolutely privileged under New York law. New York's fair report privilege protects any fair and true report of any judicial proceeding, legislative proceeding, or other official proceeding. Something that Lively, Reynolds, Sloan, and the New York Times all benefited from when Wayfarer's claims were dismissed. New York adopts a liberal interpretation of the fair and true report standard so as to provide broad protection to news accounts of judicial proceedings. Here, the post-litigation statements Lively claims were defamatory or merely repeat allegations defendants had already asserted or would soon assert in this action, namely that Lively's allegations of harassment and retaliation were false and self-serving and could not constitute actionable claims. Compare, for example, Second Amended complaint. It is shameful that Ms. Lively and her representatives would make such serious and categorically false accusations with defendant's First Amended complaint describing Lively's troubling pattern of manipulation and lies. The fair report privilege applies to a party who communicates a complaint to the press before that complaint is publicly filed. There's a footnote here as well. One of the statements Lively claims is defamatory appears verbatim in defendant's complaint. So, a statement that Lively put in her second amended complaint and claimed to be defamatory appeared word for word in Wayfarer's first amended complaint. So it's protected, it's privilege. Okay. Lively's serial conspiracy claim fails. Lively's conspiracy claim fails for several independent reasons. First, there can be no claim of conspiracy, whereas here, there is no actionable underlying tort. Second, even if Lively had a viable tort claim, her conspiracy claim would be entirely duplicative of it and should be dismissed on that ground as well. Third, outside of tort liability, no claim for conspiracy will lie. A breach of contract may not serve as a basis for a civil conspiracy claim. Nor does New York civil conspiracy law extend to Lively's federal and state statutory claims. And now Steve Sarowitz enters the filing. There is no basis for liability against defendant Sarowitz, and I completely agree with this. She hasn't actually pointed to anything that he has said or done. Other than that recording from Claire Ayub, which was very much not what it was purported to be for several months. Lively alleges only two claims against Sarowitz: false light and conspiracy. For the reasons discussed, these claims fails. Even if these claims could proceed against any defendant, no reasonable jury would find Sarowitz liable. His exceptionally limited involvement confirms why, and the record is devoid of any facts implicating him in either claim. Sarowitz is the majority investor in Wayfarer Studios and provides the studio with financing. He played no role in the production or marketing strategy of the film, visited the set only twice, and played no role overseeing press concerning the film or this dispute. Lively's claims against him are predicated on overblown comments that are taken out of context. For example, Lively alleges that Sarowitz says he would spend $100 million to ruin Lively and her family. But the discovery record confirms Sarowitz did not make any such comment, and at all times was focused only on defending himself and the studio. Yes, absolutely true. Lively also quotes a surreptitious recording of Sarowitz in which he states, "There will be two dead bodies when I'm done." But as that recording makes clear, Sarowitz was speaking only in metaphorical terms. Left out of Lively's allegations is Sarowitz's immediate clarification that he meant not dead, but "you're dead to me." Sarowitz was focused solely on making sure the studio was protected from Lively's attacks and not attacking Lively, and he disclaimed any intent to harm Lively as "not the world I would want to live in." Yes. I'm so glad that they put focus on that part. That completely removed any threat. Such comments, without any evidence of any specific follow-up conduct, are insufficient to support any of the claims in which Sarowitz is named. Several aspects of Lively's damages claims must be dismissed. Lively lacks standing to assert claims for lost profits or royalties. Lively claims redacted of lost profits associated with two non-parties redacted, as well as royalties flowing from those entities. Lively is merely an indirect shareholder of those entities and not the direct beneficiary of any royalties flowing therefrom. As such, she has no basis to claim any such damages and or to recover losses allegedly suffered by these entities. Courts routinely reject claims like Lively's in which individuals seek redress for corporate damages, including lost profits. Lively and the businesses she works with are not interchangeable. There's a chunk redacted there. Okay. Lively cannot recover speculative lost profits. Even if Lively had standing to seek damages on behalf of those distinct corporate entities, she does not. The court should still reject her demand for lost profits. Lost profit damages are too speculative where, as here, they arise from entirely new business ventures without any proven record of financial performance. And there's something redacted. As such, there is no basis upon which its lost profits can be calculated with reasonable certainty. Both New York courts and courts in the Second Circuit have dismissed claims for lost profits where the pleadings suggest that an award of lost profits would require an unreasonable level of speculation. There's a bunch redacted. So, conclusion. For the foregoing reasons and those stated in defendant's motion for judgment on the pleadings, the court should grant summary judgment in the Wayfarer party's favour on Lively's claims. Fantastic. I absolutely loved it. This is drafted, so we obviously come from heavily from Alexandra Shapiro. First class. This is money well spent. Absolutely fantastic collaborative as well with Friedman's firm, with Fritz's firm, and Mitra Hurian's firm as well, because I've seen filings from all of them in regards to this, and now in the other videos, the other parts of this, we will look at them. Excellent document. Right, I am going to give my gob a rest for a little bit, and then I will move on to the section 56.1 statement. Then I will do the declarations, and then I'll probably look at some of the attachments as well that are currently unsealed. The videos are long. I am sorry, I can't make them any shorter. The documents are massive. So, I'm not just reading them either. I'm also talking and providing a bit of commentary and talking about the legal side. I will do some bullet point kind of summary in as short as I can get videos on each of these parts that I've got planned. So if people just want the summary of interesting points, then that will come, but it will come after I've got the bigger parts out of the way. All right, thank you for watching, guys. I'll be back with part 2 really soon.